I'm here on an Ubuntu computer. It doesn't matter what Linux you have because they're all going to have the bash script. And we're going to be able to do some things like I could type ls and it's going to show us the files in our directory. I could type ls-l to get a long listing so we can see all the files. We could say something like echo hello, and it's going to echo hello on the command line. These are all things we can do on the command line. I'll say expr1 plus 1, it's going to give us the answer of 2. So these are all things we can do on the command line. But wouldn't it be nice if we could do this in a script? And let's actually put that inside a file and we'll execute it as a shell script. Now I am going to use VI. That's the editor I use. I just prefer VI. That's what I use. You can use anything you want, Nano or a graphical editor. There's a couple. If you go into this menu, there's going to be some options. If you want to use like the PlumaText editor, you can do that. I'm just going to use VI because that's what I'm comfortable with. And generally, shell scripts are either named something like stuff.sh or just any text name. We don't have to put the extension to make it work. Some people put the file extension sh to stand for a shell script. I generally don't. I generally just call it like a text file with no extension. So we're going to call this one stuff. And here we have an empty file. So the first thing I'm going to do is start typing. I'm going to put a couple spaces up there. Spaces don't really matter, blank lines. I'm going to type ls, and then I'm going to want it to do ls minus l. And what is the other one we did? We did echo hello, Sean. And we'll do an expr 2 plus 2. All right, notice in here, I'm just typing them just like I would on the command line. There's no syntax, like it doesn't end in a semicolon, and there's no weird syntax like some programming languages have. We just put it in here like we want it to execute on the screen. Now, once we get into loops and stuff, sure, there are some structures that we're going to learn, but as far as the syntax we need to make it function, we just type it in there like we want it to be in there. So let's save this file. And if we type ls now, we're going to see that file stuff is in there. If we type cat stuff, we're going to see it's in there. We just saved it, so it's exactly the file that we just created. If you want to execute it, what you can type is bash stuff. And what it's going to do, it's going to call the bash shell, and it's going to tell it to execute the stuff inside the file that we specify. Type enter, and it did all of those things. Let's see if it really did do all those things. So I said bash stuff. It did an ls. And then it did an ls minus l, and then it said hello Sean, and then it did that expr 2 plus 2, right? Okay, so it did all of the things that we wanted it to do, one right after another, which is awesome. That's exactly what we would want. Now, if you don't want to have to type bash and then the name of the file, we can actually make this an executable file. So we'll say chmod plus x stuff. All right, now if we do ls minus l, we're going to see that stuff has now turned green, which it may not be green on your distribution, but if you're using this lab, it's going to be green, and see that it now has the executable flag, which means this file is executable. So we could say /stuff, and it's going to execute right on the command line because now it thinks it's an application or an executable file, and it just executes it. So this is going to work fine. Now, there is a problem. If we were to take this program and we were to take it to another computer that maybe isn't using bash as the shell, well, then it might fail. And that's where shebang comes into play. So let's edit this file again. It's executable, but we can still edit it. It's still just a text file. And a shebang is the very top line of a shell script, and it's a very specific format. So I'm going to type insert here. The pound sign, or hashtag, I guess is the more proper way to say it nowadays, exclamation, and then what shell you want it to use. So for us, it's been bash. So this combination of characters right here, the hashtag and the exclamation, is called shebang. All right. So shebang, and then the full path of the executable that we want to use as the shell interpreter. Okay, so this line is telling the computer what interpreter do we want to use if we call this as an executable. So if this doesn't exist, notice it didn't exist and it just worked for us. What it does is it uses the current running shell if you don't specify what shell it's supposed to use. So for us, since we're currently running bash, it worked just fine. However, to be more proper, you always want to start your shell script with this shebang and then the path to bash, which is almost always bin bash. And what that says is now the computer is going to know you want to execute all the stuff in here with the bash interpreter or the bash shell. All right, so I'm going to save this. And now, of course, we can still type stuff, and it's going to do all those things for us, right? It did just like we did before. But the cool thing about this is, and this is what I really like about making shell scripts executable, is we could say sudo move stuff to user local bin. It's going to ask for a password, which is $$W0RD. And so now if we type ls, it's not in there anymore because it went into user local bin. We can see, sure enough, stuff is in there now. And since this is in our path, anywhere we are in the system, if we type stuff, it's going to do all those things. So if we make a shortcut for something that we do often, we can make it a script, put it in user local bin, and we're going to be able to execute it just by typing it. Notice I don't have to type like dot and like the full path, and I don't have to type user local bin. I can just say the name of it, stuff, and it's going to execute that shell script that we just created. Now this is a very, very simple shell script. Obviously, all it does is like ls and a couple echo commands, but you can see the beauty of being able to do a bunch of things in a single command just like that. So this is like our building block, and now you understand how shell scripts work. What I encourage you to do is make some shell scripts of your own. See if you can get them to have the results that you expect. Make a stuff script of your own and have it do other things. See if you can cd inside of a shell script. Can you say cd user local bin? And if you do that inside of a shell script and you type ls, what's it going to show you? The stuff in user local bin or the stuff in your current directory? Those are the things I want you to experiment and play with so that you get a feel for how they work. But don't forget, you want to put that shebang in there. Not because it won't work without it on our system, but because that is a best practice so that it always calls bin bash instead of whatever shell we might be running. Because sometimes when we start doing things like loops and conditionals, they'll only work in bash. They won't work in some other shell like tcsh or sh or anything like that. So you always want to put that shebang bin bash in there.